Most people imagine abandonment as a dramatic event, full of screaming and slammed doors. Mine wasn't like that. Mine came with a smile. I was 12 years old, and it was a Wednesday morning. My mother, Claire, stood by our front door, her two enormous suitcases beside her like loyal soldiers. She looked radiant, practically buzzing with excitement. My father, Mark, was already in the taxi idling at the curb. I kept thinking a babysitter must be on their way, or maybe one of my aunts. I was wrong. My mother glanced down at me. There was no hug, no "I'll miss you." She just reached into her chic little purse and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. She folded it and pressed it into my hand. "You're a big girl now, Maya," she said, her voice bright. "You're so independent. Just don't make a mess of the place." And with that, she turned and walked out. The deadbolt clicked into place with a sound that felt final. I stood there, listening to the car's engine fade down the street until it was gone. I looked down at the $50 in my palm. That single bill was supposed to see me through the next 30 days. I was standing alone in a big, silent house. I didn't realize it yet, but that crushing silence was about to become my closest companion. Before we get into the thick of it, I'd love it if you'd hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I really enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. I remained in that hallway for what felt like an hour. The sound of the taxi had long since disappeared, but a part of me was still listening for it. I think I was waiting for the screech of brakes, for the sound of the car reversing back up our driveway. I was fantasizing that the front door would burst open and my mom would rush in, her laughter echoing, saying, "Oh, Maya, you didn't really think we'd leave you, did you? It was just a silly prank. Go grab your things." But the door stayed shut. The house was utterly still. The only sound was the low, constant hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I uncurled my fingers and stared at the $50 bill. It felt flimsy. My mom called me independent, a big girl. I was 12. I didn't feel big. I felt microscopic. The ceiling in the hallway seemed to have stretched upwards, impossibly high. The shadows creeping from the living room felt darker, longer than they had just yesterday. "Okay," I said aloud, just to break the silence. My voice was thin and reedy in the empty space. "Okay, I can handle this." I decided to frame it as a challenge, a game. I liked games. My dad sometimes watched those survival shows, the ones where people are stranded on a remote island with nothing but a machete and a fire starter. They had to build their own shelters and forage for food. They had to be resilient. "I'm resilient," I whispered to myself. I walked into the kitchen. This was my island now. The cool tile was a shock against my bare feet. First things first, I needed to take stock of my provisions. That's what the survivalists on TV always did. They'd lay out everything they had. I dragged a dining chair over to the pantry. I was tall for my age, but the top shelves were still out of reach. I climbed onto the chair, my knees wobbling slightly, and swung the cabinet doors open. My stomach sank. My parents had been planning this trip for weeks. They'd been intentionally eating down the pantry, as they called it, so nothing would go bad while they were gone. I hadn't understood the full implication of that until this very moment. There was one loaf of store-brand wheat bread. I checked the little plastic tag. It expired in 3 days. A jar of almond butter, the expensive kind my mom liked, but it was less than half full. A box of saltine crackers, but the waxy sleeve inside was unsealed, so they were probably stale. There were 3 cans of chicken noodle soup, a bag of penny pasta but no jar of sauce to go with it, a box of sugary kids' cereal with maybe enough for 2 small bowls left inside. That was it. I climbed down and opened the refrigerator. The light flickered on, illuminating a bright, sterile, and mostly empty interior. There was a carton of milk, a jar of dill pickles, a bottle of yellow mustard, and a single slightly wrinkled red apple in the bottom crisper drawer. I did the mental arithmetic. A month. They were gone for a whole month. 30 days. If I had 2 slices of bread a day, the loaf would be gone in less than a week. To eat the soup, I'd need the can opener. I frantically checked the utility drawer. It was there. A small wave of relief washed over me. I have $50, I reminded myself, and the emergency card. I ran to the junk drawer next to the phone. My mom always kept an emergency credit card taped to the bottom. Maya, she told me once, if the house ever catches fire or you need to call an ambulance for some reason, the numbers for help are here. This card is for emergencies only, life or death. You do not touch it otherwise. I pulled the drawer open. It was a chaotic mess of rubber bands, dead batteries, and old takeout menus. I dug through the clutter, my heart starting to pound. What if they'd taken it? What if they'd taken the emergency card with them? My fingertips brushed against the cool, smooth surface of plastic. I pulled it out. It was a sleek platinum card with my dad's name, Mark Evans, embossed in silver letters. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had money. I had this card. If things got really bad, I could walk to the grocery store just down the road. I was going to be okay. See, I announced to the empty kitchen. It's all fine. It's just the independent game. I decided I needed a schedule. A plan would keep the fear at bay. I found a piece of paper and a purple marker in my room, sat down at the kitchen table, and wrote in big block letters, Maya's survival plan. 1. Wake up at 8 a.m. 2. Breakfast, small bowl of cereal. 3. Watch cartoons until 11 a.m. 4. Lunch, 1 sandwich, 5. Afternoon, read books or draw. 6th, dinner, soup or toast. 7th, bedtime, 9 p.m. 8th, lock all doors and windows. It looked official. I taped it to the refrigerator door. I felt a sliver of my old confidence return. I was in control. For the first few hours, it was almost fun. I flicked on the big TV in the living room. Normally, TV was off limits until my homework was done, but today I sprawled out on the huge leather couch and watched cartoons for 3 hours straight. I even propped my feet up on the glass coffee table, something my mom would have had a fit over. Look at me, I said to the empty room, doing whatever I want. The canned laughter from the cartoon just echoed back at me, sounding hollow and strange. Around 1 o'clock, my stomach rumbled. It was a loud, demanding growl. I went to the kitchen. My first impulse was to make a huge sandwich, slathered with almond butter. I reached for the jar, but then I hesitated. I looked at how little was left. If I used too much today, there would be nothing left for next week. I had to be smart. I had to ration. I took out 2 slices of wheat bread. I dipped the knife into the almond butter and took out the smallest possible amount, just a tiny dollop. I spread it as thinly as I could, scraping the knife across the bread until it was just a faint brown stain. I put the 2 slices together. It was the saddest-looking sandwich I had ever seen. I ate it slowly, taking minuscule bites, trying to make the experience last. I drank a huge glass of water afterwards, hoping to fill the empty space in my stomach. It helped, a little. I wasn't full, but the rumbling stopped. The afternoon was more difficult. As the sun began to set, the light inside the house shifted. The corners of the rooms filled with long, dark shadows. I did a patrol of the house, checking all the windows. Front door, locked. Back door, locked. Living room windows, locked. I went upstairs to my parents' bedroom. I wasn't usually allowed in there without permission. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of my mom's perfume, a strong floral scent. The bed was made with military precision. There wasn't a single piece of clothing out of place. It looked like a showroom, a hotel room that nobody actually lived in. I walked over to the closet. It was mostly empty. They had taken almost all of their clothes. My mom's collection of colorful dresses was gone. My dad's suits were gone. All that remained were a few old winter coats pushed to the back and some empty shoe boxes on the floor. A cold knot of fear tightened in my gut. They took everything. They really, truly left. Stop it, I told myself sternly. They're just on a trip. People go on trips, but why wouldn't they take me? My best friend Chloe went to Disney World with her parents last spring. They took her. They took her annoying little brother. They didn't leave her behind with $50 and a half-eaten jar of almond butter. I shut the closet door. The smell of the perfume was no longer pleasant. It just made me feel achingly alone. Dinner was a single slice of bread, toasted. We didn't have any butter, so I ate it plain. It was dry and crunchy, and it scratched the roof of my mouth. When night fell, the house transformed. During the day, it was just quiet. At night, it felt alive with menacing sounds. The refrigerator's hum seemed to get louder, more sinister. The old floorboards creaked overhead. The wind scraped branches against the siding, sounding like someone tapping their fingernails on the walls. I turned on every single light on the first floor, the kitchen, the hallway, the living room lamp. I wanted to blast the darkness away. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket. I tried to read a book, but my eyes kept darting off the page. I was listening. Creak. What was that? A burglar? A monster? Tap, tap, tap. Was that someone at the window? I grabbed the remote and cranked up the TV volume, desperate for the noise of other human voices. I didn't go up to my own room that night. My bedroom was at the far end of the upstairs hall. It felt too isolated, too far from the front door. It felt like a trap. I stayed on the couch, pulling the blanket completely over my head. I left the TV on all night. I'm fine, I whispered into the stuffy darkness under the blanket. I'm independent. I'm playing the game. I'm winning. I clutched the $50 bill in my fist. It was my prize, my lifeline. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. But it was a restless sleep, filled with nightmares of the house's walls closing in on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I woke up gasping for air, my heart hammering. The TV was still on, an infomercial for a kitchen gadget playing to an empty room. A smiling woman was chopping vegetables with impossible speed. I glanced at the window. It was still pitch black outside. Day one is over, I thought. Only 29 more to go. I squeezed my eyes shut, but my stomach was already growling again. This game wasn't fun anymore. By the morning of the third day, the hunger was a physical presence. It wasn't just a noise anymore. It was a dull headache that throbbed behind my eyes and a tremor in my hands that wouldn't stop. The wheat bread was gone. I'd eaten the last 2 slices for breakfast, stale and hard. I had to chew each bite for a long time before I could force it down. I checked the pantry again, a desperate, hopeless ritual. I knew what was in there, but I looked anyway, praying that a box of crackers had magically materialized overnight. Nothing had changed. The dry pasta was still there, useless. The soup cans sat like little tin soldiers. I looked at the almond butter jar. It was practically empty. I had scraped the sides clean. There was maybe one last spoonful at the very bottom. I couldn't bring myself to eat soup for breakfast, and I was so sick of plain water. I craved milk. I craved juice. I craved a cheeseburger. I looked at the $50 bill on the counter, then at the platinum card. "This is an emergency," I declared to the silent kitchen. Being this hungry is an emergency. I decided to go to the store. I washed my face, brushed my hair, and put on my cleanest clothes, a green t-shirt with a cartoon dog on it. I wanted to look as normal as possible. I didn't want anyone to suspect I was alone. If anyone found out, they might call the police. And if the police got involved, my parents would be in trouble. My mom would be furious. She had told me not to make a mess. Calling the police was the biggest mess I could imagine. I put the $50 bill in my left pocket and the platinum card in my right. I put on my sneakers, double knotting the laces. I stepped out the front door and locked it behind me, checking the handle 3 times to be sure. The sun was blindingly bright. It was a perfect summer day. Birds were chirping. A car drove by, and the woman behind the wheel gave me a little wave. I waved back, forcing a smile. See? Just a normal kid walking to the store. The walk was only 10 minutes, but I felt exhausted. My legs were heavy, and the headache behind my eyes pulsed with every step. When I entered the grocery store, the blast of cold air was a relief. I grabbed a small shopping basket. First, the bread aisle. I grabbed a loaf of the cheapest white bread. Then, the dairy section. I got a gallon of milk. I walked past the cookie aisle, my mouth watering. I wanted a package of chocolate chip cookies so badly. But I remembered my budget. Be smart, Maya, I told myself. I got a block of cheddar cheese. It would be filling. I got a bag of apples and a box of cereal. And then I saw them, the roasted chickens, glistening under a heat lamp near the deli. The smell was incredible. It hit me like a physical force. Garlic, herbs, savory roasted skin. My stomach clenched painfully. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing in the aroma of the chicken. I have the card, I thought, Dad's card. It's for emergencies. I reached out and grabbed one of the hot chickens. The container was warm in my hands. It felt like salvation. I walked to the checkout, picking a lane with a young cashier who looked like a teenager. She was snapping her gum. I placed my items on the conveyor belt. The bread, the milk, the cheese, the apples, the cereal, and the hot chicken. The cashier scanned everything. Beep, beep, beep. $38.75, she said, not even looking at me. My heart began to pound. $38. I only had 50, but I wanted to save the cash. Okay, I said, my voice trembling. I reached into my right pocket and pulled out the platinum card, holding it out to her. She glanced at the card, then at me, then back at the card. This isn't yours, she stated flatly. It's my dad's, I said quickly. He's waiting in the car. He twisted his ankle and sent me in to grab a few things. The lie felt clumsy and obvious. My face flushed hot. She just shrugged, clearly not caring. She took the card and swiped it. I held my breath, crossing my fingers inside my pocket. Please work, please work, please work. The machine let out a loud, angry buzz. The cashier frowned at the screen. Declined, she said. My stomach plummeted. What? It says declined, she repeated, annoyed. She swiped it a second time. Buzz. Yeah, it's not working, sweetie. It says do not honor. That usually means the card's been canceled or it's maxed out. She held the card out for me to take back. I felt as if every person in the store was staring at me. The man behind me in line sighed impatiently. I have cash, I stammered, pulling the crumpled 50 from my other pocket. I have 50. The cashier popped her gum. The total's $38.75. I could pay, but that would leave me with barely anything. Can I put some things back? I asked, feeling tears sting my eyes. I fought them back. Don't cry here. Sure, she said, her voice laced with irritation. What do you want to take off? I looked at the chicken, the warm, fragrant, delicious chicken. The chicken, I whispered. She snatched it off the counter. Okay, that brings you to $26.50. I quickly did the math. The cheese too, I said, my voice cracking. She removed the cheese. Okay, $19.80. You're good. I paid with my 50 and she gave me back my change. I grabbed the grocery bag. It felt pitifully light. I had bread, milk, apples, and cereal, no cheese, and no chicken. I walked out of the store with my head down. The second I was outside, the tears came. They streamed down my face. They canceled the card. They knew I had it. They knew it was in that drawer, and they canceled it anyway. Or maybe they just didn't pay the bill. But they were in South America. They had money for flights and fancy hotels. They had money to eat at nice restaurants in Rio. They just hadn't left any for me. The walk home was torture. The plastic bag handles dug into my fingers. The gallon of milk felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I felt dizzy. The sun was too hot. When I finally got inside the house, I locked the door and slid down to the floor in the hallway, leaning against the wall with my bag of groceries. I ate an apple right there on the floor so fast I almost choked on it. And then a new feeling bloomed in my chest. Anger. It was different from a tantrum. It was a cold, sharp, clear anger. I stood up. I walked into the kitchen and found a new spiral-bound notebook in the junk drawer. I took a black marker and wrote on the cover, "Evidence." I opened it to the first page and wrote the date. Day 3. I went to the store. The emergency credit card was declined. The cashier said it was canceled. I had to put the chicken back. I am hungry. Mom and Dad are in South America. They left me with $30.20. Now I have milk and bread. I stared at the words. It felt like I was writing about someone else, some poor character in a book, but it was me. I remembered my dad's old smartphone he'd left in a drawer. I grabbed it. I turned it on. The battery was still partially charged. I opened the camera app and flipped it to the selfie view. I saw my own face on the small screen. My eyes looked huge and shadowed. My hair was a mess. I pressed the red record button. "My name is Maya Evans," I said to the camera. My voice was quiet but steady. It is day 3. I am alone in the house. My parents went to South America. They gave me $50. The credit card they left for emergencies doesn't work. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm scared," I said, "and I'm really hungry. If something bad happens to me, I want someone to know. I didn't run away. I'm right here." I stopped the recording. I placed the phone and the notebook on the kitchen table. This wasn't a game anymore. I wasn't playing Survivor. I was just surviving. I ate a bowl of dry cereal for dinner, not wanting to use the milk yet. I had to make it last. That night, I didn't sleep on the couch. I went into the hall closet and pulled out my dad's heavy wool winter coat. I dragged it into the living room and made a small nest on the floor behind the big armchair. It felt safer there, hidden. I curled up inside the coat. It smelled faintly like my dad, like wool and old mints. The scent made me cry again. "Why?" I whispered into the darkness. "What did I do wrong?" The house just creaked and groaned in response. Nobody answered. By the 5th day, the nature of my hunger had changed. At first, it had been a sharp, noisy pain. It growled and cramped. But now, it was a heavy, dull weight. It felt like I was wearing a vest made of lead. My arms felt heavy when I tried to lift them. My legs felt heavy when I walked. I spent most of my time lying on the living room floor. The carpet was scratchy, but I preferred it to the couch, which felt too soft, like it was trying to swallow me whole. The house was so quiet that the silence itself became a noise, a high-pitched ringing in my ears that never stopped. I kept checking the landline phone. Every hour I'd pick up the receiver and listen for the dial tone, just to make sure it was still working. It always was. Nobody was calling. My mom and dad both had cell phones, They knew the house number. They knew I was here. The time difference is big, I told myself. Maybe they're just sleeping. But they couldn't possibly be sleeping for 5 days straight. I thought about calling them. I had their numbers memorized. But fear paralyzed me. My mother's voice echoed in my head. You're so independent. Don't make a mess. If I called them to complain, would she be angry? Would she call me a baby? Would she cut the trip short and come home furious? I didn't want them to come home angry. I wanted them to come home happy and proud of me. So I didn't dial. I put the phone back in its cradle. I decided to call Chloe. She was my best friend. She lived 3 streets over. Her mom was so nice. She baked cookies and always asked about our school projects. If I told Chloe, maybe I could just go over to her house for dinner. Just one meal. That wasn't begging, right? It was just visiting a friend. I dialed Chloe's number. It rang 4 times before the answering machine picked up. Hi, you've reached the Brooks family. We're away at our cabin for 2 weeks. Leave a message after the beep. Beep. I hung up. I had completely forgotten. Chloe had told me on the last day of school. They went to their cabin every July. She was gone. I sat on the floor and hugged my knees to my chest. The tears didn't come this time. I was too exhausted to cry. Crying used energy, and I had none to spare. I went to the kitchen to survey my supplies. The milk was almost gone. I'd been drinking it to soothe the pains in my stomach. The bread was gone. The apples were gone. All that was left was 1 can of chicken noodle soup and the bag of penny. I stared at the pasta. Hard, dry, and useless. I knew you had to boil water to cook it, but I was terrified of the gas stove. My mom had never let me use it. She always said I'd burn the house down. If the house burns down, use the emergency card, I whispered to myself. But the card was useless. I decided to eat the soup cold. I wrestled with the can opener, my wrist feeling weak. The metal lid was sharp, and I nicked my thumb. A single bright red drop of blood welled up. I stared at it, mesmerized by how red it was against my pale skin. I dipped a spoon into the cold, gelatinous soup. It tasted of salt and tin. It was disgusting. But I ate it. Every last bit. I licked the spoon clean. After I finished, I felt dizzy. I stumbled to the table and opened my evidence book. My handwriting was shaky and messy. Day 5. Chloe is at her cabin. I can't call her. I ate the last can of soup. It was cold. I feel dizzy when I stand up. Mom and Dad haven't called. I miss them, but I'm also really mad at them. I looked at the words, feeling like I should write more, but as I tried to stand up, the room tilted violently. The floor seemed to rush up to meet my face. Black spots danced in front of my eyes. I gripped the edge of the table, holding on for dear life. My heart was fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird. Thump, thump, thump. Don't faint, I told myself. If you faint, no one will find you. I took slow, deep breaths. The black spots slowly receded. I drank 3 full glasses of tap water. My stomach sloshed. It felt full, but it was a deceptive fullness. It wasn't food. I retreated to my nest behind the armchair and pulled my dad's coat over me. I'll just sleep, I thought. When you're asleep, you're not hungry. I closed my eyes and waited for the next day to come. Ding dong. The sound was so loud it felt like an explosion in the silent house. I shot up, my heart slamming against my ribs. I was disoriented. Was it the TV? No, the TV was off. Ding dong. Someone was at the front door. My first thought was, they're back. I scrambled out from behind the chair and ran into the hallway, nearly tripping over my own feet. I reached for the doorknob, then froze. If it were my parents, they would use their key. They wouldn't ring the doorbell. Maybe they lost their key, or maybe it was a stranger. My dad's voice echoed in my memory. Never open the door for strangers. I stood perfectly still, holding my breath, and pressed my ear against the cool wood of the door. Maya? A voice called. Maya, are you home? I knew that voice. It was a man's voice, deep and kind. It was Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a retired teacher who lived down the street. He was the one who always complimented my mom's garden. He sometimes gave me candy when I was little. Why was he here? Maya, he called again, knocking this time. A firm, steady knock. I saw the lights on in the house last night. I know someone's home. He must have been out for his morning walk. I'd forgotten he did that every day. I stared at the deadbolt. If I opened the door, I'd have to explain. If I explained, my parents would get in trouble. But I was so hungry and so scared. I just wanted to see a grown-up. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I twisted the handle and opened the door just a crack, peeking out with one eye. Mr. Henderson was standing on the porch, dressed in shorts and a polo shirt for his walk. He looked down at me, and his friendly expression vanished instantly. His eyebrows knitted together in concern. Maya, he said gently. Hi there. Hi, I whispered. I haven't seen you or your parents out and about for a few days, he said, his eyes scanning my face. I walk by here every morning, and your dad's car hasn't been in the driveway for a while. They went on a trip, I said, trying to make my voice sound normal, trying to sound like the independent girl my mom wanted me to be. Oh, Mr. Henderson said. A trip? So you're staying with a babysitter? He was looking at me so closely, taking in my messy hair, my wrinkled t-shirt with the small stain from the cold soup. Yes, I lied. She's just in the shower. Mr. Henderson didn't look convinced. He leaned in a little. Maya, he said, his voice now very serious. You look awfully pale. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, I insisted. But as the words left my mouth, my stomach betrayed me with a loud, long, mournful growl. It was a roar in the quiet morning air. Mr. Henderson heard it. His eyes flicked down to my stomach, then back up to my eyes. Is the babysitter really here, Maya? He asked softly. You don't have to lie to me. You're not in any trouble. I looked into his kind, worried eyes. I looked out at the empty street behind him. The wall I had built inside myself finally crumbled. The independent game was over. No, I whispered, my voice breaking. No babysitter? He asked. I just shook my head, tears starting to leak from my eyes. Hot, fast tears of relief and shame. Who's here with you? He asked. Nobody, I sobbed. It's just me. Mr. Henderson froze, his face a mask of shock. For a long moment, he was silent, just staring at me as if he couldn't process the words. Where are your parents, Maya? South America, I choked out. They went to South America. South America? He said the words as if they were from another language. When did they leave? Wednesday, I said, 5 days ago. And you've been here alone for 5 days? I nodded, the tears coming faster now. They gave me $50, but the card didn't work, and I ate all the bread. Mr. Henderson's face went from shock to furious, but the anger wasn't directed at me. It was a scary anger for a second, but then his expression softened as he looked back at me. Okay, he said, his voice firm but calm. Okay, Maya, I'm going to come inside. Is that all right with you? I nodded, unable to speak. I opened the door wide, and he stepped inside. The house smelled stale, like old air and fear. He walked into the kitchen, and I trailed behind him. He took in the scene, the empty counters, the open can of soup with the spoons still in it. He saw my survival plan taped to the fridge and read it. Dinner, soup or toast. He saw the notebook on the table with evidence written on the cover. He turned to me and knelt down so we were eye to eye. "Maya," he said, "you have done a very brave thing. But this is not right. This is not okay." "I tried to be independent," I said, crying uncontrollably now. "I tried to make the almond butter last." "You shouldn't have to make almond butter last," he said firmly. "You are 12 years old." He pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm going to make a phone call," he said. "We're going to get you some food, and then we're going to sort this all out." "Are you calling my mom?" I asked, terrified. "She's going to be so mad." Mr. Henderson looked at me with the saddest eyes I'd ever seen. "No, Maya," he said. "I'm not calling your mom yet. I'm calling Mrs. Gable next door, and then I have to call some people who are trained to help children." "The police?" I whispered. "People who help," he repeated. "Because you need help right now, and it's my job as an adult to make sure you're safe." He stood up. The atmosphere in the kitchen had shifted. The secret was out. The silence was broken. The game was over. Mr. Henderson put a hand on my shoulder. It was warm and solid. "You are not alone anymore," he said, and for the first time in 5 days I actually believed it. Mr. Henderson didn't leave my side. He stood in my kitchen, a large, reassuring presence in the empty space, and made a call on his cell phone. His voice was low, but I heard every word. "Mrs. Gable? It's John Henderson. I'm next door at the Evans house. No, Mark and Claire aren't here. Maya is here alone. Yes, alone. Can you please come over and bring some food? Anything. Just bring food." He hung up and looked at me. I was sitting at the table, hugging myself, feeling a deep chill despite the summer heat. "She's coming right now," he said. 2 minutes later, the front door, which Mr. Henderson had left ajar, swung open. Mrs. Gable didn't bother knocking. She ran in, still wearing her gardening apron and looking terrified. "Maya!" she cried out. She saw me and rushed over, smelling of soil and roses. She wrapped me in a hug so tight I couldn't breathe for a second. It felt wonderful. My own mother never hugged me like that. "Oh my goodness," she said, pulling back to look at my face. She cupped my cheek with her hand. "You're so pale." "John, look at her arms. She's just skin and bones." "I know," Mr. Henderson said, his voice hard as stone. "She hasn't had a proper meal in 5 days." Mrs. Gable made a pained sound and immediately opened the Tupperware container she'd brought. It was filled with pasta salad. "Eat," she said, grabbing a fork from the drawer and pushing it into my hand. "Eat, honey." Slowly. I did not eat slowly. I shoveled the pasta into my mouth. It tasted like vinegar and feta and heaven. I ate until my stomach ached. While I ate, Mr. Henderson made another call. This one sounded more official. He used phrases like child abandonment, imminent danger, and emergency welfare check. I knew who he was calling. He was calling the government. "Are they going to take me to jail?" I asked between bites. Mrs. Gable looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "No, baby, no. You didn't do anything wrong. You are the victim here. Victim." The word felt heavy and strange. I didn't feel like a victim. I just felt tired. About an hour later, a plain gray car pulled into the driveway. A woman in a blazer and slacks got out. She had a badge clipped to her belt. She walked in and introduced herself. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she looked serious, but her eyes were kind. "Hi, Maya," she said. "I'm Ms. Diaz. I'm a caseworker with Child Protective Services. I'm here to help you." I put my fork down. The pasta bowl was empty. "Hi," I said. "Do you mind if we look around the house, Maya?" she asked. "Mr. Henderson told me a bit about what happened, but I need to document the situation myself." I just nodded. The three of them, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Gable, and Ms. Diaz, walked through my house and I followed them. It felt surreal, like they were touring a museum of my private misery. They went to the pantry. Ms. Diaz took a photo with her phone of the empty shelves. She took a photo of the almond butter jar, scraped completely clean. "1 loaf of bread for a month," Mr. Henderson said quietly, his voice seething with anger. They went to the fridge. She took a picture of the empty wire racks. "No fresh produce. No meat," Ms. Diaz noted, writing quickly in a small notebook. Then they came to the table. Ms. Diaz picked up my evidence notebook. "May I read this?" she asked me directly. "Yes," I said. "I wrote it so people would know." She opened it and began to read. The room fell silent. Mrs. Gable put a hand over her mouth. Mr. Henderson stared at the floor. Ms. Diaz read every single page, about the game, the hunger, the declined credit card. "Maya," she said, looking up. "Where is the credit card?" I pulled the platinum card from my pocket. "It didn't work," I said. "The cashier said it was declined. I had to put the chicken back." Ms. Diaz took the card and placed it in a small plastic evidence bag. "We'll check the bank records," she said. "If they intentionally canceled this card or left it for you knowing it was maxed out, that is evidence of intent." "Intent to do what?" I asked. "Intent to neglect," she said simply, "to leave you without any resources." Then I remembered the phone. "I made a video," I said. I picked up the old smartphone and pressed play. My own pale, thin face appeared on the screen. The audio was tinny, but my words were clear. "I'm scared, and I'm really hungry. If something happens to me, I want someone to know." Mrs. Gable started to cry, turning away and walking into the living room. I could hear her blowing her nose. Ms. Diaz watched the entire video, her expression hardening into a tight, angry mask. "Okay," she said when it was over. "That's more than enough." She crouched down to my level. "Maya, you cannot stay here tonight," she said. "This house is not safe for you. There's no food and there's no adult supervision." "I can't go to South America," I said. "I don't have a ticket." "You're not going to South America," she said gently. "We need to find a safe place for you to stay until your parents get back." "She's staying with me," Mrs. Gable declared, walking back into the kitchen. Her voice was fierce. "She lives right next door. She knows me. I have a spare room. I have a pantry full of food. You are not putting this child in a foster home with strangers. She stays with me." Ms. Diaz looked at Mrs. Gable, then at me. "Maya, would you be comfortable staying with Mrs. Gable?" I looked at Mrs. Gable. She looked like warm pasta salad in safety. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Okay," Ms. Diaz agreed. "We can do a temporary emergency placement with a known and trusted neighbor. Go pack a bag, Maya. Just some clothes and your toothbrush. Leave the notebook and the phone here. We need them as evidence." I went upstairs to my room. It felt different now, alien. It didn't feel like my room anymore. It felt like a crime scene. I packed my backpack with my pajamas, my favorite jeans, and my old stuffed bear. When I came back downstairs, the house felt dead. The refrigerator's hum just sounded sad. After we walked out, Ms. Diaz placed a strip of yellow tape across the front door. "Nobody goes in or out until the parents return," she stated. I walked across the lawn to Mrs. Gable's house, holding her hand tightly. I didn't look back at my own house. I was safe, but I also felt a strange, heavy sense of guilt. They're going to be in so much trouble, I thought, and I'm the one who told on them. Living at Mrs. Gable's house was strange, but in a good way. It was the complete opposite of my house. My house had been silent. Her house always had a radio playing classical music. My house was empty. Hers was filled with books, soft pillows, and dozens of plants. My house had felt cold and sterile. Hers smelled of baking bread and cinnamon. For the first 2 days, I mostly just slept. I slept for 12 hours straight. Mrs. Gable, who insisted I call her Carol, said my body was in recovery. She made me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Real, delicious food. Scrambled eggs with cheese, roast chicken with potatoes, even a slice of chocolate cake. I ate everything she put in front of me. I started to gain a little weight back, and the dark circles under my eyes began to fade. But the best part wasn't the food. It was knowing I wasn't alone. On the third day, Ms. Diaz came back with her supervisor, a woman named Mrs. Shaw. They sat at Carol's dining room table with a laptop and a thick file folder. "Maya," Ms. Diaz said, "we need to ask you some more detailed questions. We need to build an official timeline of exactly what happened." "Okay," I said. I sat in a big cushioned chair, feeling small but no longer scared. I felt important. "Tell us about the morning they left," Mrs. Shaw said. "They had 2 big suitcases," I began. My mom was wearing her blue dress. My dad was in a suit. The taxi was already waiting. "Did they leave you any emergency contact numbers?" "Just the card in the junk drawer," I said, but it didn't work. "We checked on the card," Ms. Diaz said, looking at her supervisor. The account was closed by Mark Evans 2 days before they left the country. They had closed the account on purpose. A cold shiver went through me. Why? "Our best guess is so they wouldn't have to worry about any bills or automatic payments while they were gone," Ms. Diaz said, her voice flat. "They cut off your only financial resource to save a little cash for their trip. They cut me off to save money." "Did they leave you a schedule? A phone number for a hotel in case of an emergency?" Mrs. Shaw asked. "No," I said. "My mom just said I was independent." "Independent," Mrs. Shaw repeated, writing it down and shaking her head. "You're 12. Then, Ms. Diaz opened her laptop. "Maya, we found your mother's public social media accounts. We need you to look at these pictures and confirm if the people in them are your parents." She turned the screen towards me. I stared at the bright, colorful photos. There was my mom, standing in front of the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio, holding a huge, dripping cone of ice cream. She was smiling so widely her eyes were crinkled shut. The caption read, "Finally free, no responsibilities for a whole month. Brazil love freedom." There was my dad, sitting at a beachside cafe with a glass of red wine, looking tanned and relaxed. Caption, "Living the good life, cheers to us." There was another one of them on a boat, the water a brilliant turquoise behind them, both of them laughing. Caption, "Forgetting the real world, this is paradise." I stared at the screen. The dates on the posts corresponded to the days I had been starving. While I was carefully rationing my last few slices of bread, they were eating giant ice cream cones. While I was drinking tap water to stop the hunger pangs, they were drinking wine. While I was crying in the dark, huddled under a coat on the floor, they were laughing on a boat in paradise. And they called it freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from me. Something inside of me snapped. It was a quiet snap, like a twig breaking in a silent forest, but it changed everything. Up until that moment, I had been sad and scared and worried that they would be mad at me. But looking at that ice cream cone, looking at that one word, freedom, my sadness evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard anger. I looked up at Ms. Diaz. "That's them," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "That's Claire and Mark Evans." I didn't call them Mom and Dad. I used their names. "Thank you, Maya," Ms. Diaz said softly, taking screenshots of the posts. These posts prove they were not in any distress. They were not in a hospital or incommunicado. They were actively vacationing while their child was endangered. This is excellent evidence. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait," Ms. Diaz said. "We have their return flight information. It's in 3 weeks. We will be there to greet them when they get home." Will I have to go back with them? I asked, my hands clenching into fists. No, Mrs. Shaw said firmly. CPS has been granted temporary custody. You are legally placed in the care of Mrs. Gable. Until a judge rules otherwise, you will not be returning to that house. I nodded. The next few weeks were a strange limbo. I helped Carol in her garden. I read books from her huge library. I got stronger, but I was also preparing. I started writing in a new notebook. This wasn't a diary, it was a witness statement. I wrote down every detail I could remember. The look on my mother's face when she handed me the $50, the way my father didn't even look back as he got in the taxi, the tinny taste of the cold soup. I wanted to be ready. Ms. Diaz told me that most kids in these situations are confused. They cry for their parents. They want to go home. I didn't want to go home. They left me to die, I told Carol one night as we washed dishes together. Oh, honey, I don't think they wanted you to die, she said gently. They were just monumentally selfish. They didn't think. That's the same thing, I said. If you have a kid and you don't feed them, you're trying to kill them. They didn't care if I lived or died, as long as they got to have their wine. Carol didn't argue. She just dried a plate. You're growing up too fast, Maya, she whispered. I had to, I said. They made me. The day of their return loomed closer. The calendar on Carol's kitchen wall had a big red circle around August 15th. I looked at it every morning. I wasn't the scared little girl who hid behind an armchair anymore. I was the girl who had survived on scraps of almond butter and tap water. I was ready. I was ready to see their faces when their freedom came to an abrupt end. August 15th was a sweltering day. The air was thick and humid. I sat in the living room of my own house. I hadn't been inside since I'd left with Carol 3 weeks prior. The house smelled different, of industrial cleaning supplies and stale air. I wasn't alone. Mr. Henderson sat on the arm of the sofa. Carol was beside me, holding my hand. Ms. Diaz and Mrs. Shaw from CPS stood by the kitchen island. A uniformed police officer, Officer Reed, stood near the hallway, just out of sight of the front door. We were an ambush party. We knew their flight had landed at 2 p.m. It would take them about 45 minutes to get their luggage and another 30 to drive home. They should be here any minute, Ms. Diaz said, checking her watch. Remember, Maya, you don't have to say a single word if you don't want to. I know, I said. I was wearing a new dress Carol had bought me. My hair was neatly braided. I looked healthy. I didn't look like the starving girl from the video, but inside, I felt like a block of ice. My hands were trembling just a little. Then we heard it. A car door slammed, then another. I heard my mother's laugh, loud and carefree. Oh, Mark, stop it. Just grab the blue bag, she called out playfully. I've got it, my dad replied. Home sweet home. The rumble of suitcase wheels on the concrete driveway grew louder. They were happy. They were tanned. They were full of fancy food and good wine. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The key scratched in the lock. The tumbler clicked. The door swung open. Maya, we're home. My mom sang out as she stepped inside, dragging her suitcase. She was wearing a big sun hat and sunglasses. She looked up, smiling. Then she froze. She saw me, but she also saw Mr. Henderson and Carol and the 2 women in professional attire. Her smile dropped off her face as if it had been physically slapped away. What? What is this? What's going on? She asked. My dad, walking in behind her, bumped right into her. Claire, why'd you stop? Move! Then he saw us too. He dropped his bag with a heavy thump. Who are all you people? He demanded, trying to sound intimidating. Why are you in my house? Ms. Diaz stepped forward, holding up her badge. Mr. and Mrs. Evans, I'm Ms. Diaz with Child Protective Services, and this is Officer Reed. The police officer stepped out from the hallway. My dad's face went from tan to a pasty gray. Police? My mom squeaked, whipping off her sunglasses. Her eyes were wide with confusion. Did something happen? Was there a break-in? Is Maya okay? She looked at me then. Maya? Honey? What happened? She took a step towards me, her arms starting to open for a hug. I stood up from the couch. I didn't move towards her. I took a step back, positioning myself behind Carol's chair. My mom stopped, a hurt expression on her face. Maya is fine now, Ms. Diaz said coldly. No thanks to either of you. Excuse me, my dad snapped. Watch your tone. We just got back from a vacation. We left our daughter in charge of the house. We gave her money. You gave her $50, Mr. Henderson boomed, his voice full of righteous anger. For 30 days. There was an emergency card, my mom cried. She had the card which you canceled 2 days before you left the country, Ms. Diaz stated flatly. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it. He shot a look at my mom. I thought you paid that bill. I thought you did, she snapped back. It doesn't matter, Ms. Diaz cut in. You left a 12-year-old child completely alone for a month, with no food, no supervision, and no contact. She's independent, my mom insisted, her voice growing desperate. She's very mature for her age. We were trying to teach her responsibility. You taught her starvation, Ms. Diaz retorted. She pointed to the laptop on the coffee table. Maya, would you like to show them? I walked to the laptop on stiff legs. I pressed the space bar. The video began to play, the volume turned all the way up. There I was on the screen. A version of me from just a few weeks ago, but it felt like a lifetime. Pale, skinny, with dark shadows under my eyes. My recorded voice trembled through the silent room. I'm scared, and I'm really hungry. If something happens to me, I want someone to know. My mom watched the screen, her hand flying to her mouth. She started to tremble. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God. She looks sick. She was starving, Carol spat. She was eating dry pasta and drinking water to stay full while you were eating steak in Buenos Aires. The video ended. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My dad stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. My mom looked at me, tears streaming down her tan cheeks, ruining her makeup. Maya, baby, I didn't know, she sobbed. I didn't realize it would be like this. We just wanted a break. We just wanted to feel free for a little while. I looked right at her. I remembered the Instagram caption, finally free. I spoke for the first time since they'd walked in. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. You got your break, I said, and I got broken. We can fix this, my dad said quickly. We're back now. We'll go to the store, we'll get a pizza. We'll make it up to you, Maya, I promise. No, Ms. Diaz said. You won't, she nodded to Officer Reed. Mr. and Mrs. Evans, Maya is being taken into official protective custody, she announced, and you are both under investigation for felony child neglect and endangerment. You need to come with the officer now. You can't take her, my mom screamed, lunging for me. Officer Reed stepped between us, a solid wall. Ma'am, you need to step back, he said calmly. Maya, my mom yelled over the officer's shoulder. Tell them we love you. Tell them it was all just a big mistake. I looked at her, at the woman who left me with a $50 bill and didn't call for a month. It wasn't a mistake, I said clearly. It was a choice. Carol put her arm around my shoulders. Come on, honey, let's go home. We walked out the back door as the police began reading my parents their rights. I could hear my mom wailing, my dad yelling about getting a lawyer. I didn't look back. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor polish and old paper. I sat on a hard wooden bench next to Carol. Ms. Diaz was in front of us. My parents were on the other side of the aisle. They looked shrunken and pale. The tans had faded. My mom was wearing a drab gray suit that was too big for her. My dad just looked exhausted, with dark bags under his eyes. They kept trying to catch my eye. My mom would give me these pathetic little waves, trying to coax a smile out of me. I just stared at the judge. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes behind her glasses. She had a thick pile of papers in front of her. My file. It had everything. The photos of the empty fridge, the pictures of my evidence notebook, the bank records for the canceled card, the Instagram posts of their freedom tour, and the video. The hearing took hours. My parents' lawyer argued that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. He called them naive, but not malicious. He said they loved me and had just made a parenting error. A parenting error is forgetting to pick your child up from soccer practice, Ms. Diaz countered when it was her turn. Leaving a child to starve for 30 days is abandonment. Then, it was my turn. The judge looked at me kindly. Maya, is there anything you'd like to say? I stood up. I could feel every eye in the room on me. I just want to ask them one question, I said. The judge nodded. Go ahead. I turned and faced my parents directly. Why didn't you call? I asked. The room was utterly silent. We didn't want to bother you, my dad stammered. We wanted you to feel independent. No, I said, my voice clear and strong. You didn't want to be bothered by me. I turned back to the judge. They told me I was playing a game, I said, but I could have died. If Mr. Henderson hadn't come to the door, I could have gotten sick or fainted. They didn't care. My mom let out a loud sob. The judge banged her gavel. Order! She looked at my parents, her face like granite. Mr. and Mrs. Evans, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. In 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen a more flagrant case of selfish and willful neglect. You prioritized your own vacation over the life and safety of your child. She shuffled through the papers. I am sustaining the petition. Maya will remain a ward of the state, placed in the care of Mrs. Carol Gable. You will attend mandatory parenting classes and therapy. You will be granted supervised visitation only at the discretion of the child. And you will pay child support to Mrs. Gable for Maya's care, but my dad started. That is my ruling, the judge said. Bang. After it was over, we met in the hallway. My parents approached me with a social worker standing between us. Maya, my mom pleaded, her eyes red and puffy. Please, come home, we're so sorry. We'll buy you anything you want. We'll get you a pony, a new phone. She still didn't get it. She thought she could buy my forgiveness, just like she thought $50 was enough to buy my food for a month. I don't want a pony, I said. Then what do you want? My dad asked, his voice desperate. Just tell us. We'll do anything. I looked at them, at these two small, pathetic strangers. I want you to leave me alone, I said. You wanted to be free, right? Well, now you are. You don't have to take care of me anymore. Don't say that, my mom wept. We love you. You always told me actions have consequences, I said, remembering my dad saying that when I broke a vase years ago. I learned that from you. These are the consequences. I turned around and took Carol's hand. Let's go, I said. We walked down the long marble corridor, away from the sound of my parents' fading voices. We stepped out of the courthouse and into the bright, warm sunlight. I took a deep breath. For the first time in a very long time, the air didn't feel heavy. It's been 6 months. I live with Carol now. My new room is painted a cheerful yellow and has a big window that looks out onto her garden. I have a real bed with a fluffy comforter. I have a schedule, but it's not a survival schedule. 7 a.m., breakfast, pancakes or eggs. 8 a.m., school. 6 p.m., dinner, always hot and always more than enough. I never ever worry about food. Carol keeps a snack basket in my room, filled with granola bars and apples. You never have to be hungry again, Maya, she told me. Not even in the middle of the night. Sometimes I still wake up in the dark, my heart pounding, convinced for a second that I'm back in that empty house. I listen for the crushing silence, but then I hear Carol's soft snoring from the next room, or her dog shifting on his bed on the floor, and I know I'm safe. My parents are trying, I guess. They go to their classes, they send me letters every week. I keep them in a shoebox under my bed. I haven't opened a single one. Ms. Diaz says that maybe one day I'll be ready to read them. Maybe one day I'll even be ready for a supervised visit, but not yet. Last week, I saw my dad's car pull into their old driveway next door. He got out and just stood there, looking at the house. The lawn was overgrown, the windows dark. It looked abandoned. He glanced over at Carol's house and saw me in the window. He raised his hand in a hesitant wave. He just looked sad. I didn't wave back. I just let the curtain fall. I went downstairs to the kitchen where Carol was making beef stew. It smelled like home. Who was that? She asked. Nobody, I said. Just a neighbor. I sat at the table and opened my journal. I wrote, "Today I am happy, I am full, I am safe." And I realized something. My parents thought independence meant being alone, surviving without help, but they were wrong. Real independence is being strong enough to ask for help when you need it. It's being brave enough to tell the truth even when it's hard. They left me with $50 and a lie. I found a family and the truth. I put my pen down as Carol placed a steaming bowl of stew in front of me. "Eat up, Maya," she said with a smile. "I will." I smiled back. I took a big bite. It tasted like love. I was finally truly free.